Hello. Harmony. Oh yes, harmony. Not just the grammar of music, though it is. Spinal cord, holding it all together. I think it's more and more, as I advance in age, it's the colorization of the mood of music as a language. It sets the quality of the daylight, the shades and the bright lights. It tells what the words can't, and I'm not going to try to. You see? Doesn't need to be explained. Well, it's felt, just like love and expression of an affection that doesn't need rational explanation. Of course, you can explain the tension and the release through a sense of dense, intense, possibly dissonance, tension into a relief, which is temporary or more definite. And if it's atonal, in no man land, in nowhere space. And that also creates its own mood of being in this kind of flotation. So no tension to a release, no release without tension, so you don't know if it is in expectation or in well-being, since it's colorizing the atmosphere in major or minor, with a resolution or not, in a certain sense of well-being. If short-lived, as most are. And in major, there is a sense of the minor that is hidden in it. Just like the tear in the smile when you're in a relative minor of major and you're like... A minor in C major. Plagal cadence, avoiding the leading tone, giving us this sense of combination that it's unnecessary to go through the tension. We are just here to sign in or off. It's really punctuation of sentences, and of course everybody expresses themselves with the same tools of the given language they share, but differently in the sentence expression, in the length of the sentence, in the meaning of what they have to say. And if the harmony is not the verb, but the feel, it is really the atmosphere. I would say the melodic line is the narrative line. Just this made up on the spot melodic line, half sad, half happy, perhaps bittersweet, bitter, who knows. Regardless, it is in the eye of the beholder, but in the projector, in the maker of the music combination of sounds, the harmony is really the one that coats the soul of the expression of the narrative storytelling, that gives a meaning through phrasing, direction, line phrasing, structure, hypermeter, pulse, rhythmic organization, basically the track of the blood through the veins of the life in the body of the creature. It is it overtakes me so that I cannot even say it other than being almost choked by the emotional intensity of the drive. But truth be said, when you hear the harmony, it has to be either letting the narrative storytelling express itself. If you establish it in some soothing arpeggiation, perhaps in order to establish it and then leave it on the side and in a way the two of course combine, they cannot exist without each other, even if it's inverted. Or in the middle. If you only have it as an accompaniment pattern that is generically itself, then you don't need a melodic line direction, sense, narrative storytelling. You just are in this kind of sense, you are in observation of nature, of things. You're not active, or then you're really active. Eucanonic or fugal. But then the thoughts then collide or organize or shelve or in a way trigger each other by pricking on each other's intensity, but there is nobody accompanying. And so the combination creates a harmonic element like you do in beautiful motets or in Bach chorales. Is always giving a sense of solace, and the harmonization coming is in between the lines fact, but the fact are the lines, the storytelling, the layers, the expression of the multitude coming from the solitude, which is essentially what a fugue is, isn't it? Oops, 2/5. But not. You don't need to have an accompaniment, or then you have Chopin, so much Bach, or Debussy. I think the arpeggiation is a natural way to give life to the static harmonic progression, in which case you don't need anything but a chord. Gestures of the melody, the ascending sixths, the intensity of the leap over the fifth, expressive of love, of affection, of opening the arms to hug. Of contrapoint, which is the interval leap, with a perfect unmajor, non-minor interval like the fifth and the fourth, or then the sixth in the third, in their inversion mutually. the minor and the major, immediately setting a mood. And then you have the leap of the octave. And then immediately the step motion that follows. The step motion is the most soothing element, as if to give solace and to say, it's a consolation after all. We can do step by step meaningful things. It's important because, of course, a dramatic leap of an interval is like changing the tone when you say, how are you? I'm so happy to see you. Even if it's sometimes a little bit emphatic in the theatrical way, or just to say in this intimacy of the essential thing, I love you, without even to have to say it with a tone of melodic design. We always struggle as performers to find the right tone when, in fact, artificially expressing the intimacy of the written music for many people gather to listen to it, and still keep its sense of intimacy while being projected to the many. It's almost an impossible task of that, to find the right tone. It's not about loud or soft, or about rubato or straight in terms of the tempo, because there is no virtue to be in tempo, more than teaching it to students who can't keep it. Therefore, you give them through bar lines, almost like prison bar lines, and beats and metronomes. Well, now they beep, or rather the flash. They don't oscillate only, but regardless how, you feel that motion. It's almost like the heart pulse, which is uneven. So therefore the rubato by itself is the expression of the sort of melodic harmonization by delaying a certain interval, because you can do the step and then, of course, then you appreciate the leap after you do step motion. If you only do leaps, like in explore this circle of fifths, these fourths, inverted. Of course, you do it harmonically in four-part choral style harmonic progressions. And you follow the inner voices and you organize the chords, so it becomes like a groupment of melodists who agree to harmonize each note. It's almost, we don't want to disagree, so we're going to just sound so consensual. But sometimes music is not consensual purposely. It expresses the sense of stabbing, of expression, of meaning, or distress with the diminished seventh intertwined tritons. Stress the dramatic effect of life. Of course, in the tonal system, the diminished triads, and therefore combined in the seventh with the omitted root for the ninth, has different levels of explicit demonstration of that tension that is not always explicitly through the dominant, let's say, minor 11th or 13th. It can be just with omitted root, a diminished seventh. And you feel it. Bach's chromaticism is from the essence of the word color, something in Greek color, chroma. The F minor three-voice symphonia. Semi-toning rather than full toning, if it's full ton semitone, or semitone in the middle, and then open major or inverted major, going down, not inverted but just down. you harmonize, you melodize, you step motionize the tones and semitones. But the chromaticism by itself, it's nor major nor minor. By essence, it's neutral because it's both. It's not a combination of tone and semitone, it's only semitones. But because the semitone is melodically associated to the minor mode rather than the major, which starts with a major second. Therefore, if you only do semitones, then Bach naturally writes most of his chromatic music in minor, be it not a chromatic minor because it's minor, but with more semi-steps it becomes more chromatic. It's in D minor for the famous but then you could think, why not in major and chromatic? It's not the same mood. It's more tedious to be in major. And how can you be in major and chromatic? When you open the Fourth Concerto by Beethoven, you're in major and you're not chromatic, and in fact you project a sense of well-being. You invite the orchestra to answer, in fact, in what is the relative minor dominant in E minor, which we don't know yet. Since the piece starts for the first time with the piano in any way enigmatically with this open 10th chord. So you cannot define it by the opening for the mood, but you can feel like there is some kind of a subconscious gesture that is there, sent to us through the harmonization to say this is going to be pastoral or it's going to be dramatic. But to be chromatic and in major, again, it's rare. It's usually the dramatic effect of the over minor with more diminished, or rather not, with, well, also chords, but the minor steps than major steps in the scale. It's possibly evident that if you do something like the opening of Gaspard, obviously you install a feel in the hint of the subtlety that we are in major, because it's a major triad. That's not mystery, it's a fact. And the sixth, instead of being, and then we feel, it could have gone there in this kind of, heavenly celestial feeling, and then it could have been in minor if the minor six, the neighboring tone coming with a minor triad, then it will be something like Rachmaninoff does in G sharp minor. But here it's in major, at least the triad is major, and the sixth is minor, like in the second theme of the first sonata Beethoven. We are in a relative major A flat, since we are in F minor principal key, and the second theme is not this, is not. Relative major A flat with the flats of minor 6. But this kind of half major, half minor suggests very subtly that there is a more ambiguous duality about the mood that is set there. It's almost like a bright light, but this A natural there resonates in that soup of notes, of resonance of the notes rather than the notes themselves, as if something is ominous, and then the first melody note comes as a major second on each side of the C sharp. Not yet, not, but later. So Ravel starts with the minor second, then he opens to the major second in the top, and then the melody goes down from that to the major minor. In fact, there is not a defined major minor feel. It's just a feel of wait and see, something is captivating. So it's not major minor really, because it's not an established system where you already have expressed it. It's more like hinting, injecting subtle ambivalent mood through these alterations. Of course, when you have in the middle of Debussy's cathedral the parallel chords that are just triads, major, minor, and C major. Mussorgsky in the pictures. Again, this kind of chorale style of parallel or just tonal chords compared to the chorale of the four parts monk singing, while still very much triadal. More subtle than and I find that when you find this kind of moments where the music is just bright open and says, please visit me, I open my arms, I welcome you, then you feel like you're in comfort zone. That's usually the major mode, well, combined, mood. I think all these harmonies are suggestive of things to come in the piece, or opera, or quartet, or sonata, or whatever the form that are hinting something while establishing first something else. And so when you hear a beginning of a cantata, obviously if he did this in major, we would feel that as an invitation to a certain brightness of being. But in B minor, B minor, D minor, iconic minors for expression of spiritual uplifting or solace through first a lot of pain. The Requiem by Fauré. With the descending tetrachord of the feel for lament. But it's D minor, and this so is the Requiem by Mozart, regardless of the tuning that could perhaps make it sound. At least there is an intent for the tonal choice of the color of the tonality. But it's true that it's disconcerting when you hear something that you always loved in a key to which you attribute all the virtues for the meaning of it that means to you in terms of perhaps even words that cannot compare to express it. And then you hear it played on a given instrument because of a certain way it's tuned, traditional or original or new. And you feel like if anything is transposable, then my feelings for the piece aren't. It's somehow connected to A minor if it is. Piece by At least it's, even if they're all tuned differently in different churches. At least I think it has. Perhaps it doesn't. In absolute terms, it's all transposable. But then when it's like saying all humans are the same as long as they're constructed the same. Of course, they are in terms of humanity, but then you attach yourself to the personality of each, whom you're given a chance to cross the path of. And at some point, there is some situation where you isolate and say you are the most beautiful person in the world. It's not because you had a survey of all the others personally, but you choose to. That subjective connection to a human being, to a musical thought, perhaps even to a philosophical thought, to a form of art that elevates you beyond and above the finitude's problem of why, here, now, when, until where, and what am I doing, and all that. We all search for that, and we find answers in different teachings, meanings, people, and sometimes works of music. I cannot define how much more philosophical music can be than philosophy, but I think it is. Regardless if you're a musician or not, when you hear, and I just said when you hear, I could say when you feel. And for some it's when you pray. Touch with your immaterial you, and therefore the immaterial you of the others. And of course then G major is solace. It cannot be. But then it has a different way to touch me through the expression of this mode, major and minor. And of course there's so many sub-modes, but just to say, if you just transpose, you can say, okay, well, it's relative pitch, it's relative interval, it's the same anyway, just higher or lower. But because it's lower, then it's closer to perhaps my humanity. And if it's the higher pitch, then like violin compared to viola or cello brings me to something more elevated compared to, let's say, perhaps the spiritual desire to ascend compared to transcend even, and so much more transcend even. But then when you play it in the middle of the range, therefore somewhere human range and not this, which then brings you to a certain other atmosphere. It's almost like not just the grammar of music, as I said earlier, for the harmony, but the placement of it in space. Then it creates a sense of elevation, or then and who knows if it's so it's not better or less well. It's just that I think we are in a way perhaps prisoners of having known it in the original key when we learned it, heard it, perhaps just wrote about it, regardless how we connect to it or solfege it in my case, as many who studied the wording of the sounds. Do, ré, mi, ré, do, mi, ré, fa, mi, sol, fa, la, sol, fa, sol, ré, mi, fa, mi. Regardless how we approach it, words, sounds, perceptions, moods, atmospheres, intervals, the grammar, and then modulation, how we perceive the whole fact of modulation. You know, we travel after we purchased our ticket, but then all of a sudden, before we traveled in mind, because we purchased our ticket, then while we are traveling, all of a sudden we discover all these universes, and we're like in awe when we modulate, and we have Schubert is so good at those harmonic ones, and Schumann is also good at delaying until we finally later find our intense resolution of this situation. So then you have where in the Berg Sonata it's almost, to me personally, belittling to finish in B minor. I think the beauty of it is like in Fauré, to be constantly going somewhere in a desperate, perhaps frantic, sometimes sensual, but combined search for the flame. In Fauré. So are all B minor pieces with the same mood, because Forest 30th Nocturne and Berg B minor first sonata are only. Perhaps because we play many pieces where a pianist, the vast repertoire, and even ones not written for the piano, mostly actually, these examples or performances, we tend to connect therefore more the comparisons at the subconscious level, this D minor of the quartet by Mozart with his Requiem, or the concerto. I think are connected, because we cannot not think I don't feel it. I feel like, okay, it's up there, it's right, it's one step above, but I know it's not it. Even if I try to think, I'm gonna make my subconscious think it is. After all, it's a question of adapting. And sometimes you do that when you hear things semi-step up or down according to perhaps recordings and pitches, but beyond that, in a tone or two tones, harder. And if Bach wrote the 12 and 24 and 48 and all these, the keys, of course Caspar Fischer did that before Ariadne Musik. It's not the first, nor obviously the last with Shostakovich, and many others, exploring the fact of expressing so many things to different keys. But even Bach, when he writes his Weltern für Klavier in 1722 or 44, he doesn't use the same mood for things like G sharp minor. Besides, he doesn't establish a mood in the interpretational sense of it. So who is not to say it is this? Just because then you attribute it to the bowing atmosphere logic of the 2 and 1 in the subdivision of groups of 3 and 12/8, and so you could say, oh, it's bowed, therefore it should be in that tradition. But on the piano, because of the length of sound, you don't need to make any of it, so you can sound like breathless, even because it's rhythmically without patterns by Bach, or you can add them. It then becomes a jig. Then when he writes one, he does, and he doesn't in this, it's just even notes. Are they intended to be phrased as even, since they're instrumental for the harpsichord on which he composed it for? Oh, la, 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 la. So many thoughts about how to coat the mood of the atmosphere that we perceive through our ears of today compared to the knowledge of what they heard then, did live with then, but of course, since then we heard more than they did. And in a way it distracts us to filter it more clearly what it was for them as a perception, and regardless what is for us as a perception today, since we're the product of what we discover. After all, we study, we learn, we are curious, we hear, we can access, we discover, we rediscover music of the past, perhaps sometimes more strikingly the music of the present, or as disconcerting as music of the present. So we cannot say we live like somebody in a village in the 17th century somewhere in Europe, because that isolation doesn't exist today, at least not to most of us. And so then, if anything is everything, then we play everything in the same way. We play Haydn, like anything. Everything is not anything. Moods, characters, atmospheres, through the harmonic dressing, the melodic dressing, the absence of harmony, in a way, the absence of tonality in the atonal music. This kind of atomized situation where the nuclear element of music, or in terms of the tonal system through the circle of fifths, the triads, the chords, the tensions, the rhythms, all this goes into, it's like watching the endless amount of stars in the endless amount of sky, meaning the heavens at large and in depth, and with you're lost. And I think atonalism is a way to get lost, or to reject an organization that is circle of fifths closed and framed by the lock of the tritone, and then the tension and the release, the major and the minor, the singing and the narration, and the accompaniments that suggest the mood. So we are all subjectively, in a way, surrendered the get-go with the kind of music we start learning. Of course, if we only deal with atonal music from childhood, we will not find it as disconcerting than if we do it portion after having done 90% of tonal music because of the apprenticeship that we're given to go through. Because it covers more or less for pianists between Bach and today, and for many musicians before Bach, especially with vocal situation of the music developing. So many thoughts. I still go back to the fact that, in my humble opinion, crafted through the experience of having had been offered a perfect pitch at birth without asking for it, shaped by the understanding of the beauty of harmonic progressions in the practice of them in keyboard harmony, just like pianists practice a scale to play it evenly, or harpsichordists to play it by the groupment of fingers with the phrasing and the sub-phrasing of the bowing, and of course the breathing through the bowing or the breathing itself. So all the instruments have their own element of dictating to us what is the idiom of their expression through their means of the expression, the scratching the string, the vibration of the sound, the touching of the very through the body itself, sound production, unlike pianists who play through the action of the piano. And we sort of imagine it that we are singing in denial of the decay of the sound. Or something. In a way, the pedal helps in the piano to organize more of these resonances that give us the sense of vibrating like the soul vibrates to life, or the leaves on the wind. So we use these harmonic effects to convey, in fact, these inner moods that we connect with being part of the nature, and nature being us. We are nature. Not just thoughts, but also felt elements. We just are feeling creatures, and the harmony brings us to that. Through that, to our inner us. Well shared with all of us. Thank you for having spent a few minutes in my digressions.